As you navigate the vampire underworld of Seattle, you're going to need a lot more than just fangs to survive the night. With Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 out on October 21st, it's time we take a look at the most essential tips, mistakes to avoid, and secrets you don't want to miss. A lot of which I wished somebody would have told me before playing. Also, huge shout out to Paradox Interactive and White Wolf for the early code and for being the sponsors of today's video. Totally check out Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 using my links down below. That being said, at number 1, choosing your character's clan is more than just a role-playing option. Your choice here can have a significant impact on the way you play. And there are 6 clans in total, corresponding to 6 different classes if you will, and when choosing your elder clan, you have to be mindful of the specific passives here at the bottom of the ability trees. That is because the first one will be exclusive to the clan that you start your character with. So for example, if you want Bruja's Brutality passive, which gives you a massive melee strength boost after feeding on an enemy, this is only going to work for this specific clan. Similarly to Ventru's Flash of Marble, which makes you highly resistant to damage, only works for the Ventru, and so on. Everything else besides that, on the other hand, is fair game. So all of the active abilities from this point on, as well as the passive perk at the top, can be unlocked by pretty much everybody by simply completing all of those clans' specific skill trees. In this case, you can only have up to 4 active abilities at any given time, but you can pretty much unlock all of them. So eventually you can mix and match and change your build around. Meanwhile, the passive perks at the top, they can all be active in the background at any given time, meaning that they will always give you those benefits once fully unlocked. And some of these passive perks can affect entire categories regardless of the clan they belong to. So for example, in the case of the Fleetness perk, which normally belongs to the Toreador, it works and thus recharges over time any relocate ability that all of the 6 clans have access to. So basically all of the ones in the second active row from the bottom. In other words, giving you lots of room for build crafting via a very synergistic skill matching approach. Which brings us to point number 2 and some extra tips on unlocking abilities quicker. When it comes to your own starter clan, you will unlock all of the skill tree fairly early on, not long after finishing the prologue. For everything else, however, it will require a more involved 2-step process, which means first getting the blood resonance points to learn the new abilities and then getting the XP necessary to unlock them for later on. Keep in mind though, you can only ever have up to 4 active skills at any given time. So while gaining XP is as straightforward as it gets, either from completing quests, open world activities, and engaging in combat, the blood resonances are a bit more nuanced. So there are 3 types of blood resonance, including sanguine, choleric, and melancholic, and NPCs will typically display one of the 3 or a white to imply no current resonance, which you will reveal by using your heightened senses skill. Since each skill unlock requires a different combination between the 3 colors, here are some quick tips to more quickly and thus easily unlock way more abilities from early on. First of all, NPCs with any of the 3 colors will act differently, and thus different skills, dialogues, and even outfits will work on them in unique ways. So for the sanguines, which glow in pink, they typically like to flirt, so if you do that and act nice, you can make them an easy prey. Cholerics, which glow red, as the name suggests, they are the angry type, so if you interrupt their conversations or if you argue with them, you can easily antagonize them to make them chase you in back alleys. Finally, for melancholics, the ones glowing in purple, they are a little bit more tricky than the others because they tend to run away, so early on you'll typically be the one chasing and harassing them through back alleys. Some of these colors can also be marked on the map, which gives you a little bit more ease of access to specific colors. They are random, unfortunately, though, so you don't really have any control, but marked NPCs are a little bit easier to deal with because they act exactly as they are supposed to, so it doesn't really matter that much your dialogue options or even outfit combinations. However, most important are the victims with no current resonance, or the ones with the white glow, because they are an excellent way of farming more points early on, simply because you can influence which resonance they get depending on the ability action you use against them. So this is something that you can only influence via effect abilities such as Beckon, Taunt, and Glimpse of Oblivion, so it may be worth to unlock all of these 3 so that you can influence the white glowing NPCs in whichever resonance you want, depending which abilities you want to unlock next. That has been one of the best ways I was focusing on to get as many abilities as I possibly could. And of course, finally, to fully maximize the number of points you get from actual feeding, is the fact that you don't have to fear about overfeeding. You can just keep doing it because your character eventually automatically stops and will not fully drain your victim anyway. So this way you can get the whole 100 points from each feed rather than the lower value from canceling too early. Now moving on, next we have to talk about the Masquerade. If you're unfamiliar with the franchise, Masquerade is basically an organized campaign enforced by the Camarilla to convince people that vampires do not actually exist, and breaching this Masquerade is punishable by instant execution, stake through the heart and whatnot by the Court of Vampires. So anything that reveals your powers, using your vampiric powers near humans, jumping too high, using vampiric sprints, of course feeding in plain sight, will actually trigger this. It's not going to be instant and there is room for mistakes or accidents, and you can track all of this by paying attention to the Masquerade meter and visibility indicator at the top of your screen. But do keep in mind that if you do breach that, it's going to also subtract 150 blood resonance points away from you, so you have to go back to feeding even more. So in this case, best course of action is to lure targets into back alleys via any of the previously mentioned interactions. And in this case, don't just look out for the eye icon, as it's not going to always be reliable. Also look if there's physically any other targets in your line of sight to see what you're about to do. In this case, hobos typically don't matter too much because they don't really pay that much attention and will mind their own business, but you may find others prying into your own business if you're not being too careful. And if you do happen to see your meter actually starting to increase, you can just disengage, run away on a rooftop and whatnot, and that's typically going to eventually make it fall over time and get you back to zero. Moving on to number 4, side content is actually quite important for progression, and that is because if you pass the night, you will also lose access to the previous night's side quest. And fortunately, this doesn't mean losing out on any plot points, but it's just going to make you miss out on some XP. So in this case, I recommend completing some of these as you progress. There are 6 clans in the games and 6 representatives, each marked with their own clan symbol on the map, and 3 of them give pretty straightforward objectives you can complete each night. So Nico will give you human targets each night, people he considers that deserve to exit alive, so it's easy to hunt them down. Mrs. Thorn will actually have you deliver items or pick up deliveries, and they also go quickly. Meanwhile, Onda will always have an assassination contract for you to perform. The remaining clan reps, however, will give you more long-term objectives like clearing out graffiti, collecting iron crosses, and destroying security cameras around the city. And if you want to go with a completionist approach in mind, make sure you complete these before a certain point of no return that happens later in the main quest line. And number 5, a quick tip is that the Crosshair is actually going to be your best friend in all of this. The game features a reactive Crosshair which grows whenever a secret is nearby in your line of sight. So this will be helpful in finding these clues, potions, quest items, and so on around Seattle and during your own side quests. Blood graffiti will also be found on rooftop walls and also alley walls. Always be mindful of your Crosshair as it will get larger around these points of interest. Meanwhile, security cameras will be found on wall corners and under bridges and so on. So usually the Crosshair will help here as they are a bit more secluded. Finally, the iron crosses are a bit more tricky. They are found in each building you have access to, so you have to make sure that you don't just leave any building before collecting them, since later on you might be locked out from some of the areas. At least that was one of the things that I've noticed later on. And speaking of that, since we talked about unmarked NPCs, we do have some secret interactions to also discuss, because some clan abilities can be used both actively from the skill bar but also passively, as they provide extra dialogue prompts with different effects, depending of course on the NPC's blood resonance. And this is important to note because using these skills either actively or passively comes with their own upsides and downsides. So for the active versions, the ones you have on the skill bar like the Taunt, Glimpse of Oblivion and Beacon, they have the benefit, like I said before, of changing white glowing NPCs resonance to whichever resonance color you want depending on the skill that you use. So if you want pink, you will use Beacon, Glimpse of Oblivion into purple and Taunt for the red. Meaning this is a great way of farming specifically the type of resonance that you need without having to resort to the RNG spawns around the map. This is one of the best ways, like I said, to maximize the points needed to unlock as many skills as possible if you want to try every single one of the skill combinations out. However, like I said, there's also a downside, because using these actively in this way will also start filling the Masquerade breach meter, some more than others. And while typically you're never going to be in danger of fully breaking it this way, it is something to keep in mind in case you have performed other actions prior to this that did actually bring you close to that edge before breaking the Masquerade. Instead, what you can do to avoid all of these hassles is also using their passive aspect that now influences the dialogue options. So once you unlock these 3 abilities, you're going to notice that even if you don't have them equipped on the skill bar, you still get bonus dialogue prompts depending on the type of effect ability that you have. So for example, Bruja's active taunt ability will piss off and aggro NPCs by default, which slightly fills that Masquerade meter with each use. However, in conversations, that same taunt now provides an extra dialogue option which guarantees more or less the same effect to annoy the target in this case, but without affecting the Masquerade meter at all. Keep in mind that the dialogue prompt only works on NPCs with their corresponding resonances and not the white glowing NPCs. So in this case, it may be better to engage in a dialogue first, and because you've already activated these in the skill tree, you can now use the dialogue version instead to stay more under the radar and not have any reasons to break the Masquerade. We've also got to talk about combats. Obviously, there are more useful combat tricks here, one of which is that even though dodging is easy, parrying may provide greater benefits. So instead of pulling back via a dodge, you can actually dodge towards an enemy using the dash button at the right moment. Your character, in this case, if you do it at the right time, will completely deny the incoming enemy melee attack, preventing all of its damage, which may not be quite as easy to trigger, but it's definitely satisfying. Also, you can Spartan kick most of the enemies off rooftops by simply run dashing into them. So if your skills take too long to take them down, you can just let Mother Gravity handle it for you. Also, skill synergies are where the fun is at in this game, and there are many combos you can pull off depending which skills you use, and not just the combination, but also in whichever specific order you use them. So for example, early on in my Tremere playthrough, I was using Cauldron of Blood to draw in enemies near a main target, and then using Blood Curse on the same target to make the primary one explode, resulting in a gruesome AoE combo that was dealing great amount of damage to large groups of enemies at one single time. This also works when combining the skill of multiple different clans. So building off from the same Cauldron of Blood, which draws enemies in, I was then adding in Mass Manipulation from Ventrue, that now causes quite a few of the abilities in the game to affect more than just one target. So in this case, pretty much everybody in the line of sight, which is everybody because of the Cauldron ability I just used. And then finishing it off with something like a Terminal Decree to command everybody to just exit life together. And this is best used for mortals and ghouls, but it can also mass disarm and mass staggers, in this case vampires, as they are a bit more resistant. Or combining the two with Possession to cause everybody to attack each other in a mass brawl. I'm telling you, the possibilities here are endless, and the game gives you many ways to actually play with your food. More on that will follow in a different video guide about all of the crazy combinations you can perform in this game. But let's keep on going, and at number 8, fashion is going to be quite important in this game. The way you dress your character, not just the dialogue options and the skills you use, will have a major impact on how unmarked NPCs perceive you and even lock you out of possible conversations under specific circumstances. Not all of them, but I've compiled a list of some of the possible interactions depending on the different clan and attire combinations. But what you should know is that each clan clan has different attires you will progressively unlock as you also unlock abilities for the first time corresponding to those clans. And around 1 or 2 of them, typically the first and the last, will provide these secret bonus effects in conversations. So using priest attires, for example, from La Sombra, will have NPCs address you as if you were part of the clergy, with all of its ups and downs. Similarly, Toreador and some of the Ventru attire will make you appear way more attractive, meaning that NPCs will literally try to flirt with you, and it may become even difficult to actually antagonize them. Some of these even had unintended consequences, such as causing melancholics to default back to a neutral white glow instead of their typical purple as a result of seeing a Toreador with attractive attire, which you can use to your advantage in this case if you want to farm for a specific type of resonance, but otherwise may affect your dialogue and the way they perceive you. And of course, this brings us to our final note about Fabien, the noir-style detective in our heads, basically, whose memories are playing during the day when we are asleep. During his memories, he's trying to solve a case, and in order to do so, he's making use of his Malkavian abilities to influence or read people's minds, interacting with objects which tell a story, and so on. And Fabien has 4 important abilities which aid him in his quest, but you have to use them correctly. The game actually prompts you whenever you make a choice that is not correct, and it tells you if it is or not. Sometimes, however, dialogue choices can lock you out from getting the right answer, which will have Fabien hit a snag in that case. So you have to be careful about how you approach and keep an eye out for these dialogues as they happen. So be careful about how you approach certain individuals and also how you collect the clues in each of the cases. Also, each of the skills you use will eventually get depleted. So to fill it up, he cannot attack citizens, but you will have marked on the map phlegmatic resonance NPCs who will feed Fabien willingly. So in this case, don't forget to feed before trying to solve the next clue, so you don't have to run back and fill your ability once again. And that pretty much concludes everything we have for today. In the meantime, once again, totally check out Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 by following the links down below, and I will give another big shout out to Paradox Interactive and to White Wolf for sponsoring today's video.